One of the things I would like to talk about, because this is new,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what I've said already you can find elsewhere. You can find me saying it elsewhere, probably on the internet somewhere. But what I'm going to say now is completely new, and nobody will have heard this before.
Wow.
And I know that there are quite a few people out there, detractors, who are saying, the Lemba, they're not really Jewish, and all of this, and there's not really any black Jews in Africa and so on. So, okay, the story I've told is hypothetical to some extent. It's true that we found a link between East Africa and the Lemba. But maybe there's more to the story than that. And at about the same time as the Lemba were beginning to create a separate identity, or a tribal identity, after the destruction of the Great Zimbabwe civilization, there was another group also called Lemba. And these Lemba were also people that dealt in healing and in magic. And they were to be found, the second lot of Lemba people, more or less in the area of the Congo. And one of the things I talk about in my new book, which is this book here, Hybrid Hate, and you'd really have to go to the footnotes to get this information. And so you're not going to find it in a quick read. You're going to have to really study the book to get to these passages. But the facts and the proofs are mentioned in this book anyway. So we know that from about 1500, so 500 years ago, there was a black Jewish community that lived in the African kingdom of Loango.
Mm.
And they're mentioned really for the first time in Western literature in 1777. And that really is a very, very important thing in this last book of mine. And so what happened then, you've got a slave who's in one of the Danish colonies in the West Indies, and he's talking to a German missionary. And the German missionary he's a good guy, and he's very interested in the position of the African slaves. He's against slavery fundamentally, but he's extremely interested to know where these people came from. And so he sits down in this island, this Danish property, St. Thomas, which is now an American possession. And he interrogates them. He said, "Where'd you come from? What kind of things did you see on the way? What sort of job did you do? Were you from the interior? How many wives did you have?" All kinds of questions. He was a great anthropologist. And so this one slave that he interrogated said that he was from Loango, and that he said, "Anything interesting to tell me?" He said, "Well, yes, there is something interesting to tell you, because in Loango there are black Jews." Mm. And he told some of the stories about the black Jews. So the black Jews do not even speak on Shabbat, because Shabbat, it's too holy. They don't even speak. They do not speak, and I'm just using the term used in the original German, they do not have anything to do with the Negroes. They were black themselves, but they were Jews, and then the other people are referred to as Negroes. So they're as black as the Negroes, but they're not Negroes, and they have little to do with the Negroes. and they have separate graveyards. And on the graves, there are images of snakes and lizards. And then there are a few other very intriguing details about this Black Jewish community in West Africa. Nobody's ever made a connection between the curious secret society of the Lemba in that part of the world. And it's highly speculative what I'm saying, but I think there's a very, very good chance that there's a connection between the Black Jews of Loango, the secret cult of Lemba, and then the Lemba over in the central part of Africa. Almost certainly, but I can't prove it. But again, I'm throwing this out. If there are any bright young students or people looking for a PhD thesis, this could be something to really work on.
Oh, wow.
It's extremely interesting. And then, okay, well, we have this slave in 1777, and he's, telling the German missionary that then we don't hear any more at all about the Black Jews. And not for 100 years. And then, round about the time of German reunification, there was a German scientific mission to the Loango coast. And a number of German scholars and scientists, they arrived in a boat and they camped just next to the Black Jews town. And they did a study of the population of that part of West Africa. And among other things, they gave a fairly good description of the Black Jews of Loango who were still there. Since then, there were one or two comments about them. That was in 1770s. So 1780s, 1790s, we hear a little bit, not much. And then they kind of disappear from history. And it could be, this becomes a little bit vague, but it looks as if when the French colonized Loango, which they did in the 1890s, that they were traders and very prosperous traders in a very prosperous, centralized state. People forget how, civilized many of the African states were before colonization. And anyway, the French destroyed the possibility of trading effectively, and they moved inland. And so to the east of the Republic of Congo, a rainforest which is called the Ituri rainforest. And they seem there to have intermarried with a population up near the rainforest. And again, it's one of those things that a young scholar can follow up. There's plenty of evidence in my book for them to start, but a DNA project looking at that population would be absolutely fascinating, because it would certainly connect with Jewish DNA, going back to their emigration from Portugal in the 15th century. In other words, if you're looking for Black Jews in Africa, there are quite a number of different routes. If you talk to our friends in Nigeria, they will find distant connections going back a very, very long period. That's one possibility. There's not very much historical basis for it, but it doesn't matter. In the case of the Lemba, we have a possibility via the East Coast. So the penetration of Africa from the East Coast. further north, plenty of evidence that Judaism spread into Africa, either from the Yemen, and that's what we usually think, or through Africa, or through Egypt, and trickled into different parts in the north. And also, we've got plenty of examples of Jewish settlement in the early 1500s in the northwest, in places like Senegal and Saint Tomé, an island off the west coast of Africa, not very far off the west coast of Africa, and now Loango. So the big question for the African community, African Americans, and there's been a lot of discussion over it, is, there are plenty of people who think, well, Judaism came with us to the United States or to the Americas from Africa, and this is something that's widely rejected as being impossible. But I think my research indicates that nothing is impossible. And given that there were plenty of Black Jewish communities which had settled long before the beginning of transatlantic slavery, it's entirely possible that there were Jews who were enslaved in the West Coast and, of course, in the East Coast. Not that many slaves came from the East Coast. Comparatively, most of the slaves came from the West Coast, and Loango was a major country for the export of slaves. Anyway, that's a new chapter for people to look at.